Belgrade, April 6, 1941, 5:15 a.m. The sound began as a distant hum. Then it grew into a roar that shook windows and rattled lungs. Without warning, waves of German bombers appeared in the sky over Yugoslavia. Belgrade woke to explosions, collapsing roofs, broken streets, and terrified civilians running for cover. The Luftwaffe called it Operation Punishment. Thousands would die in hours. Europe had seen destruction already, but here, at this moment, a new chapter was opening for a man who would become one of the most effective spies in history. His name was Duško Popov, a wealthy Serbian, well-educated, fluent in multiple languages, raised in privilege, and known in elite circles across Europe for his confidence, charm, and taste for luxury. To many, he looked like a man built for pleasure, not war. But the world was changing. Violence erased borders. Intelligence became a currency more valuable than armies. And Popov found himself standing at a crossroads between survival and resistance. Before the bombs fell, Popov lived in London as a young lawyer, moving in diplomatic and business circles. He had already experienced the first signs of what was coming: interrogations by the Gestapo, pressure from German contacts, whispers about networks forming in secret. In 1940, while working in Germany, he had been arrested and questioned by the Sicherheitsdienst, SD. The Nazis believed he might be sympathetic to British interests. Popov walked out alive, but only because of his ability to lie convincingly without flinching. That moment changed him. He saw clearly what Nazism meant: brutality, paranoia, ideological fanaticism, a system built not just on conquest, but fear. When Germany invaded Yugoslavia, Popov understood something personal. Neutrality and wealth could not protect anyone from total war. He had watched friends disappear under Nazi rule. He had seen a country fall in a single morning. He made a choice that would define his life. He would fight the Reich, not with a rifle, but with deception. 2 months later in Lisbon, a city neutral, elegant, and filled with espionage shadows, Popov crossed the threshold into a clandestine world. German intelligence officers approached him. They believed he could serve their interests. He accepted the invitation, but not for them. Unknown to the Germans, Popov had already been in contact with the British. He informed MI6 immediately. The British gave him permission to continue, not as a collaborator, but as a double agent. His German code name would be Ivan, his British service designation Agent Tricycle. The choice of nickname would amuse historians later, but at the time it reflected a simple truth. Popov did not work alone. He helped coordinate multiple sub-agents and streams of false information. His role required calm, intelligence, and a capacity for constant danger. He would operate not in trenches, but in hotel bars, embassy salons, and coded cables. War had many uniforms. His was a tuxedo, a tailored coat, a perfectly controlled smile. Lisbon in 1941 was a battlefield without gunfire. Spies from every side, diplomats pretending not to spy, businessmen laundering intelligence, and ordinary citizens unaware they walked inside a silent war zone. Popov blended in easily. German handlers admired him. They believed he could infiltrate British high society and gather intelligence on Allied plans. They did not know they were feeding him information that would soon be turned against them. He received money, assignments, secret ink instructions, and micro-coded messages. His first major mission: travel to the United States and gather technical and military information, especially about military bases and aircraft production. But one detail stands out in the German task list. The Japanese wanted reconnaissance on Pearl Harbor. At this moment, Popov held in his hands a warning the world would later debate for decades. Before leaving Europe, Popov met MI6 handlers in London. The British gave him precise instructions. He must cooperate with German requests as far as possible, but feed them data that appears valid while protecting real secrets. He was not simply lying, he was performing a controlled narrative operation. The goal was not only to mislead, it was to earn German trust so deeply that his future falsehoods would shape enemy strategy. In August 1941, Popov boarded a ship to the United States. He carried with him a German-supplied espionage questionnaire referencing naval bases and Pacific defenses. When he arrived in New York, he did what a man with deadly secrets does. He contacted the FBI immediately. But the reception was cold. J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI, distrusted Popov instantly. He hated foreign agents, disliked Europeans who lived flamboyantly, and considered Popov arrogant. Hoover refused to fully cooperate. He had no idea that the man standing in his office would later inspire James Bond. Yet Popov did not abandon the mission. He worked under constant threat, German execution if discovered, British distrust if he failed, American suspicion at every step. He stayed in expensive hotels because the Germans expected it. He made appearances, acted confident, never allowed fear to show. A double agent cannot afford hesitation. One slip means torture, then death. The thrill of fiction does not exist in reality. Only calculation, caution, and silence. Behind the scenes, Popov transmitted British-approved misinformation to German contacts. Meanwhile, he observed American intelligence weakness. The FBI had little experience in counter-espionage. Popov saw vulnerabilities everywhere. Conversations overheard in hotel lobbies, military families speaking openly in trains, businessmen discussing contracts without caution. He realized that even a single skilled spy could extract dangerous information. It was a chilling discovery. The United States was not prepared for the intelligence war already underway. The months ahead would bring breakthroughs and betrayals. Popov would move between continents, balancing lies so carefully that one imbalance could collapse everything. The British trusted him cautiously. The Germans trusted him completely. And somewhere across the ocean, Japan prepared an attack that Popov tried to signal, a warning history would judge too late. Sometimes war is loud, brutal, and visible. Sometimes it is a whisper in a hotel bar, a coded message hidden in a postcard, a man pretending to drink for pleasure while memorizing the face of the person behind him. Popov's war began not with a gunshot, but with a question. How do you destroy a tyrant's empire without ever firing a bullet? If you were in Popov's place, would you risk everything to deceive an enemy that kills spies with no mercy? New York City, August 1941. For most people, arriving in Manhattan meant skyscrapers, nightlife, and opportunity. For Duško Popov, it meant walking into a country that did not yet know it was at war, a nation confident in its distance from Europe, unaware of the silent threat already inside its borders. He stepped onto American soil as a German agent in appearance, a British agent in reality, and a man alone in truth. He carried a German intelligence questionnaire demanding details on U.S. defenses, factories, naval bases, and most pointedly, installations in the Pacific, among them Pearl Harbor. Popov moved quickly. Before meeting any German contacts, he went directly to the FBI headquarters in New York. He requested an urgent appointment. A war was brewing, and he held intelligence that could save lives. But instead of receiving the cautious cooperation he expected, he walked into a room ruled by suspicion. At the desk sat J. Edgar Hoover, powerful, proud, and deeply mistrustful of anyone he did not control. Popov presented the German questionnaire. He explained his role as a British double agent. He warned that the Japanese were gathering intelligence on Pearl Harbor. Instead of listening, Hoover saw arrogance, extravagance, and a foreign accent. To him, Popov was not a warning. He was a threat. The meeting ended not in cooperation, but hostility. Hoover ordered Popov watched, not supported. The FBI tailed him everywhere, convinced he was a dangerous agent rather than a man risking his life for Allied victory. Popov understood immediately. In America, he would operate without institutional protection. Yet the mission continued. His German handlers expected progress. The British expected deception. The Americans, unknowingly, expected nothing at all. Popov began the delicate process of performing espionage in reverse, appearing to gather secrets while feeding Berlin fabricated reports. To maintain his German cover, he lived the way the Abwehr imagined a successful spy should. He stayed at the St. Regis Hotel, attended high society dinners, walked through lobbies where wealthy businessmen talked too loudly and military officers shared information without caution. America was a fortress, but its culture was not prepared for secrecy. He observed weaknesses everywhere. In cafes, officers discussed troop movements. In trains, families shared letters from husbands at bases. In bars, executives boasted about defense contracts. Popov did not exploit these moments. His mission was not to harm America, but to protect Allied strategy while building German trust. Every overheard detail became an opportunity to construct false intelligence that looked realistic. He also saw how isolated American intelligence was. Unlike Britain's MI6, America had no unified wartime espionage system yet. The OSS, precursor to the CIA, was still forming. Hoover's FBI focused on domestic crime, not global spy networks. Popov realized the United States was entering the greatest war in history, with eyes half closed. Behind the scenes, British control operatives in London monitored every message he sent to Germany. They reviewed his coded radio transmissions, ensured his reports contained convincing detail without revealing anything critical, and guided him carefully. Popov served as the delivery system for lies that would shape Hitler's understanding of Allied capabilities. At the same time, danger was constant. German funds came through Lisbon banks. German officers expected regular updates. Any inconsistency, a wrong phrase, a misinterpreted signal could expose him. A double agent survives by precision. He cannot trust instinct or luck. He must think 2 moves ahead in every conversation, every letter, every glance. Yet Popov played the role perfectly. He charmed businessmen, officers, diplomats. He cultivated the image of an international gentleman with resources, influence, and curiosity. Each interaction reinforced his German credibility. Each day he remained undetected, increased Allied advantage. But his mission was not only information, it was warning. He had delivered intelligence related to Pearl Harbor. He repeated the urgency in coded channels. Still, no U.S. authority acted decisively. Months passed. Japan prepared. The world moved toward a moment that would change history forever. Meanwhile, Popov saw how fragile double lives truly are. A single mistake meant death. He maintained composure through constant surveillance. German watchers abroad, FBI watchers at home, MI6 checking every action. He slept in hotels where walls seemed too thin for secrets. He held conversations, knowing someone always listened, and yet the exterior remained calm. A drink poured with practiced ease. A casual remark loaded with intent. A gentle nod, signaling more than politeness. Espionage is not glamour. It is loneliness disguised as confidence. It is fear behind a steady gaze. Popov lived every day understanding that if he failed, his body would likely never be found, and his name would vanish long before anyone could defend it. In Washington and New York, he watched American intelligence fumbling to adapt. He did not judge them. No system is born perfect, but he saw clearly that the war of information would decide the future. Nations could win battles with guns, but victory would belong to the side that mastered secrets. By late 1941, pressure rose. Pearl Harbor neared. The United States still hoped to avoid direct conflict. German intelligence trusted Popov more than ever. British command prepared him for deeper deception operations. The stakes were no longer personal, they were global. And so he continued. a man living between lies and truths, carrying a warning few believed, fully aware that the next phase of the war would determine whether his mission succeeded or history erased him completely. Double agents do not ask for recognition. They ask only to stay alive long enough for the truth to matter. Popov was not fighting to be remembered. He was fighting to make sure others lived. Would you have the discipline to lie every day, knowing one wrong sentence could end your life in a basement interrogation room? London, January 1942. The night sky over the Thames glowed with dim orange light, remnants of fires from the Blitz. The bombs had stopped for now, but the echoes remained. Broken windows, hollow buildings, empty chairs at kitchen tables. Britain breathed, but not peacefully. It lived in a constant state of readiness, caught between survival and uncertainty. Duško Popov returned from America with a quiet frustration. He had carried a warning that went unanswered. 4 months after his meeting with the FBI, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Thousands died. America finally entered the war, but too late to prevent catastrophe. Popov did not claim credit for the warning, nor did he point fingers. He simply absorbed the truth. Intelligence is only valuable when someone is willing to hear it. Now back in London, MI6 gave him new orders. The war had shifted. Hitler controlled most of Europe. The Soviet Union bled in the east. The United States mobilized in the west. Britain prepared for something larger, deception operations designed not just to hide the truth, but to manufacture it. Popov was no longer just gathering false intelligence for Germany. He would now become part of a vast Allied plan to make Hitler believe the invasion of Europe would come not at Normandy, but elsewhere. Calais, Norway, Greece, anywhere but the real target. Operation Fortitude had not yet been given its famous name, but the foundations were forming. Popov would be a critical channel. The Germans trusted him fully. Everything he sent now mattered on a strategic scale. A careless word could shift enemy forces. A convincing lie could save tens of thousands of lives. He met with his British handlers regularly in safe houses across London. The rooms were quiet, simple, lit by low lamps. Conversations were short, analytical. Popov reviewed microfilm instructions, radio cipher pads, routes for coded messages. He did not improvise. Improvisation is death in espionage. Every communication followed structure. Every story had rehearsed logic. He did not merely play a role. He became it. The Germans, meanwhile, praised him. They sent more funds, more assignments, more confidence. They believed Popov's charm and international connections made him invaluable. Berlin saw a rising asset. London saw a weapon disguised as a gentleman. Both sides admired him, but only one knew the truth. Outside the intelligence rooms, London lived as best it could. Trains rattled past blackout curtains, citizens queued for bread and coal, soldiers marched through streets lined with posters urging silence. Careless talk costs lives. Popov watched ordinary people carry extraordinary burdens. He felt a deeper commitment to the mission. Spies are often portrayed as detached, selfish, driven by ego. Popov's reality was different. He saw war up close, and he wanted it to end. He also knew danger grew with every transmission. The more successful a double agent becomes, the closer death follows. German intelligence did not forgive betrayal. If his cover broke, torture awaited him. Spies captured by the Abwehr rarely lasted long. Secrets were beaten out slowly, painfully. Trust vanished instantly. Popov lived each day with this knowledge. He never showed it. He mixed in society to maintain his persona. London nightlife continued despite the war. Officers, diplomats, foreign businessmen, everyone gathered in smoke-filled rooms, jazz bars, private clubs. Popov spoke lightly, smiled easily, listened more than he talked. He learned patterns of speech, gestures, fears, ambitions. Information is not only coded messages, it is human behavior, power dynamics, loyalties whispered over glasses of cognac. Yet he never stepped out of character. Even moments of leisure were controlled. A double agent rests only on the surface. Beneath, he calculates constantly. Who watched him enter the room? Who asked unusual questions? Who lingered too long at the table behind him? What appeared to be a social evening was, in truth, fieldwork. MI6 monitored him as closely as the Germans did. Trust existed, but always in measured doses. Spies are useful only when supervised. Popov understood this. He accepted silence over praise, suspicion over comfort. He knew a double agent is not a hero during the mission. Only after, if ever. In early 1942, his role expanded. He established secure lines across neutral countries, particularly Portugal and Spain. Lisbon remained a key battlefield of hidden diplomacy, a place where Axis and Allied agents sat in the same cafes, reading newspapers, pretending ignorance. A smile at the wrong moment, a gesture misinterpreted, could attract fatal attention. Popov became fluent in that silent language, the art of being noticed just enough, but never too much. Meanwhile, his German contacts remained convinced. They believed his reports, praised his professionalism, increased funding. He returned their admiration with perfect acting. Sometimes he wondered whether they sensed anything. They did not. Confidence blinds as strongly as ideology. The success of a double agent depends not only on lies, but on truths strategically placed. Popov occasionally passed minor real information. Unimportant, but accurate enough to maintain credibility. Deception works best when truth and falsehood are woven together so tightly that cutting one thread destroys the whole pattern. He mastered that balance. Through radio operators, secure channels and coded telegrams, his messages reached Berlin. German analysts reviewed his intelligence and reported it up the chain. They believed him. That belief would eventually play a role in one of the greatest military deceptions in history. But that moment had not yet arrived. For now, Popov lived in the fragile middle, between trust and betrayal, loyalty and suspicion, safety and death. His silence protected nations. His lies moved armies. A man alone, operating in shadows, shaping the fate of millions who would never know his name. He never carried a gun. He never commanded troops. But information has power greater than explosives, and deception, when executed at scale, becomes a battlefield of its own. Popov walked through London's night streets aware of one truth. Espionage does not seek glory, it seeks results. And in this war, results would determine whether democracy survived or vanished into darkness. As he prepared for the next assignment, a thought crossed his mind. Not of victory, but of endurance. War was not won by brilliance alone. It was won by those who could endure doubt, fear, and isolation without breaking. Could you live a life where every friend might be an enemy, every compliment might be a test, and every success brings you closer to being exposed? Lisbon, summer 1943. On the surface, the Portuguese capital looked untouched by war. White buildings, ocean breeze, cafes overlooking the Tagus River. Tourists sipped espresso. Diplomats strolled past luxury hotels. But beneath the sunlight, Lisbon was the most dangerous city in Europe. Neutral ground, where spies from every side moved like shadows through elegant streets. German officers met British agents in the same bars. American OSS men watched Soviet informants in hotel lobbies. Spanish intelligence traded rumors. Portuguese police pretended not to see, and every conversation carried a second meaning. It was here, in this quiet battlefield without uniforms, that Duško Popov reached the peak of his double life. By 1943, the tide of the war had begun to shift. The Allies gained strength, Germany felt pressure on two fronts, and intelligence became critical. Now, instead of feeding minor false information, Popov carried part of a large-scale deception, a plan to mislead the German High Command about future Allied operations. He met his German handler, Major Nikolaus Ritter, in Lisbon's cafes and waterfront hotels. Their meetings looked casual, two educated men discussing politics, business, war prospects. But each word mattered. Ritter trusted him fully. The Abwehr believed Popov was among their most talented assets. They admired his social access, his intelligence, and the smooth confidence he carried everywhere. That admiration was dangerous. The more the Germans trusted him, the deeper his risk. If they ever doubted him, it would not end with a simple dismissal. They would interrogate, expose, and eliminate him, not quietly, but as a lesson. Popov received questions, objectives, funding, and coded messages. The Germans wanted to know Allied production capabilities, troop preparations, potential invasion points. Popov gave answers they expected, supported by detail, sprinkled with truth, structured to guide German belief. He became part of a controlled narrative, one that would eventually help convince Hitler that an Allied landing would come not in Normandy, but at Pas-de-Calais. To operate effectively, Popov balanced three fronts at the same time. With the Germans, he maintained trust. With the British, he followed direction. With the Americans, he treaded carefully, still shadowed by the FBI's mistrust. Every move required judgment, every sentence calculation. He never relaxed psychologically, even when his smile appeared effortless. There were moments of personal strain. Double agents cannot speak freely to anyone. Even allies question motives. Popov lived surrounded by people, yet fundamentally alone. He attended dinners, spoke to businessmen, appeared at embassy receptions. Always listening, always aware someone might watch from behind a glass or across a hall. Human contact became theater. The world saw charm. Reality was vigilance. During this period, one of the most dangerous tasks involved transmitting radio messages to Germany. Operators encoded German instructions in microdots or invisible ink. Popov responded through MI6 channels, ensuring every detail aligned with British strategy. He learned to manage time differently. One mistake in a transmission schedule could trigger suspicion. The German system measured discipline. Popov met every deadline, never hesitated, never sent a report that seemed rushed or uncertain. Predictability protected him. Yet while he deceived the Germans, he saw their growing desperation. Their questions shifted. They sought information about sabotage, Allied shipping lanes, Mediterranean operations. They sensed pressure. A collapsing regime becomes unpredictable and paranoid. Popov understood danger was rising, not fading. A cornered enemy does not become passive, it becomes erratic. In Lisbon, he also interacted with other agents, many unknown even to him. Occasionally, he would catch the eye of someone across a room, someone who held their glass too still, who listened more than spoke, who glanced at exits. In espionage, recognition does not require names. It exists in subtle signals, posture, attention, silence. But polite ignorance kept everyone alive. Despite operating in secrecy, Popov saw results. MI6 praised his reliability. His reports helped reinforce German belief in an eventual invasion of France at Calais. His cover remained secure. His handlers respected him for discipline and composure. In a war defined by armies, he shaped strategy through information. But the work took its toll. He wrote nothing personal. He confided in no one. When he returned to Britain for brief periods, he felt the world move around him normally. Families shopping, children running, life continuing. He did not belong to that world anymore. Spies rarely reintegrate. Even when surrounded by people, they remain observers. Back in Lisbon, he continued the routine. Meetings, coded microfilm, subtle exchanges. His travels across neutral and occupied zones required forged documents, careful planning, and absolute calm under unexpected scrutiny. German security intensified. The Gestapo's attention extended beyond borders. Popov avoided Berlin entirely. He knew one wrong trip would end everything. While the world imagined war as tanks and battleships, Popov knew another truth. Wars are also fought by silent decisions in hotel rooms, paper trails, and whispered doubts placed into enemy minds. He played that war flawlessly. Still, danger grew. One German contact, perhaps curious or suspicious, questioned details. Popov responded without hesitation, his lie so precise it disarmed doubt. Another officer asked about his finances. The Germans had funded him generously. He managed accounts carefully, appearing ambitious but disciplined, never greedy, never careless. Greed exposes spies, restraint protects them. By late 1943, Allied efforts to fool Hitler intensified. Popov became one of the crucial human channels. He sent reports indicating Allied forces massing in England opposite Calais. He described fake units, inflated troop numbers, and fabricated supply flows. Germans believed him. His credibility, built over years, turned into a weapon. Trust is a powerful tool, and Popov used it to weaken a dictatorship from within. As he left another meeting on a warm Lisbon night, lights from the harbour reflected across dark water. Neutral ships floated silently. Somewhere, German intelligence reviewed his latest report, confident in its value. Popov breathed steadily, his expression calm. He did not celebrate. Victory in espionage does not feel like triumph. It feels like surviving another day. In war, soldiers risk their lives openly. Spies risk theirs invisibly, without recognition, without applause, knowing that if they fall, even their story may be buried. Popov walked back to his hotel alone, knowing he would wake the next morning to the same tension, the same secrecy, the same mission. Deceive the enemy so others could fight with advantage. When survival depends on trust from those you plan to betray, do you feel power, or do you feel the weight of every step you take? London, June 1944. While Allied troops prepared for the greatest seaborne invasion in history, a different battle was reaching its climax in the shadows. In safe houses across Britain, coded reports were checked, radio messages reviewed, and deception plans finalized. The Germans watched the English Channel, convinced the invasion would strike at Pas-de-Calais. Their belief did not form by accident. It was engineered. One message, one false troop report, one trusted spy at a time. And among the most convincing voices feeding that illusion was Duško Popov. When D-Day came, German divisions were positioned incorrectly, held back by the fear of a second landing that never came. Allied soldiers stormed Normandy, while 10 German divisions waited for an attack in Calais that Popov and others had helped invent. Deception does not shout, it whispers until the enemy listens willingly. On June 6, 1944, the whisper had become strategy, and strategy became survival for tens of thousands of Allied troops. Popov did not stand on a beach. He did not command ships or tanks. Instead, he walked past radio operators and intelligence officers in London offices, knowing that the lies he had nurtured were now saving real lives. No applause followed, no public recognition. The men in those rooms returned to their desks, updated files, made tea, and continued working. History moved forward quietly. As the war progressed, Popov's role evolved again. German trust remained strong, but the regime grew unstable. The Abwehr fractured, the Gestapo tightened grip, paranoia spread inside Nazi ranks. Good espionage ends before suspicion begins. MI6 slowly reduced Popov's involvement, not from doubt, but caution. An agent who is given so much must not be pushed until risk becomes inevitable. In 1945, the war in Europe ended. Crowds filled Trafalgar Square. Bells rang across cathedrals. Flags waved. People who had survived years of fear laughed freely for the first time in half a decade. Soldiers returned home. Families reunited. Nations breathed again. But intelligence operatives like Popov did not celebrate publicly. Their work did not stop, and their names did not appear on victory speeches. Spies do not retire with parades. Their achievements remain hidden behind classification stamps and controlled archives. Popov left British service quietly. His wartime identity remained secret. Britain enforced strict silence on its intelligence veterans. Files were sealed, testimonies erased. The world knew of battlefield generals, not double agents in suits who shaped the battlefield without standing on it. Popov returned to civilian life, but a double agent does not easily become ordinary again. He had spent years lying convincingly, reading danger in casual glances, trusting no one fully. Peace did not erase instincts built for survival. He tried to build a life beyond coded messages and silent rooms, business, travel, relationships, but the shadows followed. For years, the world believed the invention of modern intelligence glamour belonged to fiction. Then came Ian Fleming's novels. A cold, elegant spy. A man who drank well, moved through high society, lived dangerously. Readers called him James Bond. Fleming had seen Popov in Lisbon. The inspiration was there, but Popov's truth remained classified. The irony of espionage is simple. Those who risk their lives in silence often watch others receive public glory. And yet, Popov never protested. His mission was never fame. It was duty, survival, and conviction that tyranny must be confronted not only by armies, but by intelligence. In the 1950s, Popov attempted to tell part of his story in memoirs, but legal restrictions and classification prevented full disclosure. Many dismissed him. Critics doubted him. Even in freedom, truth could not be fully spoken. The man who had deceived Hitler could not persuade publishers. That is the burden of working in silence. Proof arrives late, if it arrives at all. Then decades later, declassification began. British archives opened, records emerged, historians traced operations, decoded cables, verified missions, and slowly the truth surfaced. Popov had been real, effective, critical, not a Playboy myth, not a movie fantasy, but a disciplined, strategic double agent who influenced one of the most decisive deception operations in military history. He died in 1981, before the full recognition came. His name had been a whisper in the intelligence world. After his death, it began to travel further. Books, documentaries, files unsealed. People discovered that behind the fiction stood a man who risked everything not for thrill, but for purpose. War celebrates soldiers and commanders. But between battles, another war occurs, one fought with silence, patience, and the ability to lie so well that truth emerges in the end. Popov lived in that world. He endured suspicion from allies, trust from enemies, constant danger and complete invisibility. He did not break. Today, when the world discusses spies, it speaks often of legends from cinema. Yet before the tuxedos and gadgets, there was a real man sitting in cafes in Lisbon, speaking calmly while carrying secrets that shaped history. He never fired a shot, but his deception protected millions who never knew his name. History eventually remembered him, not loudly, not completely, but accurately. And in intelligence, accuracy is the greatest honor. If the world forgets your sacrifices because they were made in silence, do you regret the work, or accept that some victories are meant only for those who fought them?